We're continuing with Torah Or, in the first book of Hasidut Chabad, written by the first Rebbe of Chabad, explaining the Tanya. That was really his book, the Tanya. And then afterwards he wrote the book called Torah Or, which explained the ideas of the Tanya. What was the purpose of the Tanya? So to activate the Jews, to do the work of Moshiach and activate the Jews serving God. What's so important about serving God? Well, the point of this mimer is that the whole entire world, the life and the very existence and the sustenance of the whole entire world, believe it or not, depends on the Jewish people serving God. If the Jewish people serving God, even one of them, then that's what sets the world into circulation. Life force of God comes to us. We return life back into the Creator. Our energy then arouses his energy arouses our energy. And the creation becomes a creation, and it becomes alive, and we have people with the world, etc. Who would believe such a thing? Says the Rebbe, even the angels. The angels are screaming out, crying out to God constantly. They're burning up. You can look in the book of Ezekiel, in the book of Isaiah. It describes their experiences, seeing angels and their visions of the upper worlds, and all the angels are all praising God and saying, holy, 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 God of hosts, the world is filled with his glory. And these angels, myriads, oceans of angels, the huge angels. And all depends on the Jewish people. So that's the point. The whole entire world, spiritual, physical, all depends on this handful of people, these few people. It's something like how the heart, which is not a very big organ, if you compare it to the rest of the body, it's the life source. It pumps the world, pumps life into the whole entire body, and it keeps everything circulating. And without the heart, you're in bad shape, even if there's something wrong with the heart. So that's why the Rebbe is writing these books and is trying to get it across to us, the amazing importance of this. Now, this is not just a psychological thing and a pretend and make believe, and that this is what's happening, a motivation for us, and it's it's like one of those motivational movies with the music playing in the background, and the whole thing depends on you and only you can do it, and the man is on the top of the mountain and he made it. This is talking about truth. This is the real, true fact, and in a way it explains the strange the thing that happens in the world, the strange occurrence in the world, which is called anti-Semitism. What in the world is different about the Jews? What do people pick out the Jews for? Why? The Jews don't look particularly different than anybody else. They don't act particularly different than anybody else. Why do they hate anti-Jews? A lot of Jews, they completely, you don't even know they're Jews. They don't even know they're Jews. Nevertheless, there's people that hate the Jews. And why do they hate the Jews? Because the Jews are different. The whole entire world depends totally on the Jews doing the Torah. And even more, and so that puts them, that's like the teacher's pet. People don't like it. People don't like it. But the fact of the matter is, it's more than just the teacher's pet. The whole entire world really depends on the Jews. In this case, the teacher is the creator, and the creator is creating everybody. So here the Rebbe in this mimer is trying to stress to us the importance of serving God. But somehow or other that fits in to what King Solomon said, that his left hand is under my head and his right arm embraces me. And this idea, what does it mean? His left hand is under my head. Says the Rebbe, that's when not good things, when negative things, when difficult things, tragedies, hardships occur. He says that is under my head. That elevates the Jewish people. Okay, you don't have to wait for bad things to happen to us. We can do it to ourselves. What does it mean? The Rebbe is not in any way trying to encourage self what it was called, emulation or self-flagellation, whatever they call this, of suffering yourself, suffering and fasting and wearing, we're sitting on beds of nails and things like that. Exactly the opposite. A person has to serve God from happiness. But what does it mean? That sometimes you have to break your heart. You have to throw big doubts into your own egotism and your own self-certainty. And that, in some ways, is how do you say, a bigger torture than anything else. For a person to admit to himself that he's wrong and to change himself is very difficult thing. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So let's go. Says the Rebbe, we're talking about the good things now. We're talking about how the angels, they're all saying, holy, holy, holy. And this all depends, Hine, behold, I think this is where we got up to last time. Hine, behold, Hine, behold, Orav Amshacha, this ray of godliness that comes down to the angels. To the angels. How does it come down to the angels? It says the angels get this ray of godliness, and that perks them up to say, holy, holy, holy. Right? Like the animals, they used to be in Kfar Chabad, there used to be a cow farmer, used to milk the cows. And when he would give them a little bit of food, right? So they would all moo, they'd all go berserk. They all wanted to get more food. Right? And when it was food time, he would ring a little bell and they would all, start moving toward where the food is. Why is this? Because that's their livelihood. The same thing, God gives light, shoots down a little bit of light to these angels. They feel it and they all start singing, screaming. Where does the light come from? It says that it comes from the arousal of God caused by the Jewish people. That's why it says, Hine, Oravam Shachav, Nishpashet, Lamata, this arousal of light, which is drawn down from God to the Jewish people. Lavatel aguv, love to be surrendered to the Creator. Yesh lo yitaron, it has a big advantage on the light, the chayus hamitpashet b'malachim, in the angels. Or when the Jewish people, against all odds, they defy nature and they defy their own nature, and they serve the Creator of the universe, as this draws down light into the angels, and the angels then, they start screaming and crying and yelling out. Those are the angels that Isaiah saw. They are burning up because of this ray of godliness that comes down to them, or rather through them, to the Jewish people. The Jewish people, by their service, they cause a revelation of God coming into the world, and it comes through the angels. And the angels get this revelation. That's what makes them scream and yell. Says the Rebbe, this godliness which comes down to the Jewish people is higher than that which comes to the angels. Why? Because it's like a better type of light that comes from darkness. Sheyeshlo tosefes ora, there's an additional light and joy. Shagam aguv, also the body, naser merkava liyechudo, becomes a vessel for godliness. Like, for instance, if you have a person that was in an accident, terrible accident, or that he lost consciousness, whatever, and he's a bad situation, and then he gets out of it. He gets out of the situation. Oh, that person appreciates life more. I mean, it could be that he'll be just, depressed and shaken up and traumatized by it. But if he's not shaken up and traumatized, then that person appreciates life more than anyone else. And everyone appreciates that person more than others. Oh, Joe, wow, how I was worried. You were so sick and now you're better. You have no idea how happy I am. Right? Thank you. When you see other people, meet people all day, you're not so happy to see them. Even your good friends. Here's a person that's not even your good friend. You like him. He's a nice person. You know him. He's an acquaintance. And he was really sick. You were worried. You were saying Tehillim for him, Psalms, and he got better. Oh, it's a big thing. Right? We're happy you're alive. That's the same thing. The Jewish people here in the world, they're like sick. They're far away from godliness. They don't feel what's life. It's like they're in a coma. They don't feel God. They don't sense God. They don't love God. They don't hear God. They don't understand God. in this world, when they come out of this darkness and serve God, it's a big novelty. And even the angels are happy. But the light that the angels get is nothing like the Jews get. It's like this, like just carry on the metaphor, right? Uncle Joe goes into a coma and he's tremendously ill and everybody's praying for him and he gets better. So everybody's happy, but the happiest one is Uncle Joe, right? It should be, right? If he can overlook the terrible trauma that he had and the fear and things like that, he should be the happiest one. He was, and every moment of his life becomes happy. The same thing as the Jewish people, that they're in the darkness and they come out. This is a tremendous light, and the angels appreciate it. The angels appreciate it. Look, and therefore, we Jewish people say, Hashem Elokeinu. We say that God is our God. Shalanu mamish. The angels do not evoke a revelation of God because they don't come from the darkness. But the Jewish people do, because they change nature. So they evoke a tremendous revelation of God. This might sound a bit weird, and it is weird, but it's the truth. That was the whole idea of the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple, the Jews served God, and because they served God, so the whole sustenance and benefit and the productivity and the happiness and the love and the children and the health of the world came through that. It came through the Jewish people serving God. For instance, a person he brags what he's got. A person brags, he's happy with what he has, even his foot, which is not the other people. He doesn't brag about somebody else's hand. It's not his. This, even though the Jewish people, they don't get such a big revelation. The angels, they get a big shot of godliness. But even though what the Jewish people receive is, we see what happens. You do a commandment, you feel anything. It's just a little ray of godliness. Shior de mata comes down very, very low. The Ibichin is regal, and this is like the foot, the ikr to the main thing of the light, which is above. It can't come down into the body, right? When a Jew does a commandment, so it evokes this tremendous light of God, and the angels are going berserk because of this light of God. But this light is only coming through them. But how much actually comes to us? A little tiny, maybe a little bit of a ray, a stimulation of, God maybe exists. Sha'oto, or this little bit of a light that we get, nevertheless, it is called Rosh, it's called the head. Lagabi in regarding to what the angels get. One second. No. No, I'm sorry. What the angels receive, this big revelation of God, that's like the head, but it's somebody else's head. Mikol Makom, nevertheless, behold, Elokeinu, our God, this is ours. Like it says, Banim Atem L'Shem Elokechem. Okay, what's the Rebbe trying to say here? Look, when we do a commandment, we get a little bit of godliness, and we say that God is our God. The angels can't really say it's their God. They know that this revelation of God that comes to them, it comes because of the Jews. They know. That's why they say the whole world is filled with God's glory. But the angels get a much bigger revelation than we do, infinitely greater. But that's what the Rebbe is saying. It's like somebody else's head and my toe. Which is more valuable to me? Right? To me is more valuable my toe than somebody else's head. Right? I'm not worried about the other person's head. I don't feel what happens to the other person's head. The same thing, the revelation that the angels get, this is a very big revelation of godliness, but it's like somebody else's head. And the revelation the Jewish people get, it's very small, but nevertheless, it's like our toe. Good morning, Davi.
How are you?
That's the Jewish people. So the Jewish people, it's called bra, a son. Kara'ah is like the leg, the avua of his father. Shenaz bechinas regel, the Jewish people, they are like the foot in regarding the person. Shu atzmis echad, but nevertheless, it is our foot. It is God's foot, so to speak. And therefore, Omer Rizal, the rabbi, say, you should surrender your will in front, you should surrender your will to God's will. We should be God's foot. We should be negated to Him. And to do God's will. Shemo, just like the regel, just like a foot, is negated to the Lagabi. Yeah. Adam, I said right, just like a person's foot is negated to the person, that everything that a person wants to do, right? Call Asher Yachpots, Yitnu, everything that the person wants to do immediately. If a person is healthy, his foot does. And the foot doesn't have any will of its own at all. That's what the Jewish people can do. They become the foot, so to speak, of God. God's commands in the Torah, what we should do, it should be that we feel and we automatically do the right thing. Just like a person automatically runs away from fire and he automatically, there's good food, he eats the food. It's an automatic thing. So also the Jewish people automatically should run from things that God doesn't want and go toward what God wants, which is not the case to angels, right? The angels, they have no free will to use, right? They can't choose what is good or bad. They don't do good and they don't do bad. The angels just are what they are. It happens to be that God created them to be holy. So they're naturally given over to God. But God doesn't, so to speak, get any real power from pleasure from that. Where does the real pleasure come from the Jews? But the Jews nevertheless only get a very small revelation of God. Here we see what happens in the world. And the angel's very big. He says, yeah, but it's like my toe and somebody else's head. That's why we say in the beginning of the blessings of the morning, that's the first blessing we say in the blessings of the morning. One second, what is this? Right, there's like 15 blessings we say in the morning. As soon as you wake up in the morning and you wash your hands, etc., and there's 15 blessings that you praise God. Thank you, God. You released me. You gave me eyes to see, and that you make me I can stand upright. But the first of all these blessings is that God, you give the rooster understanding that he can make a distinction between day and night. That's what religious people bless in the morning, right? Thank you, God, that you give to the rooster understanding to discern between day and night. You ever hear a rooster? There used to be roosters in Kfar Chabad. There's no roosters anymore. Roosters can know when it's 12 at night. The roosters in Kfar Chabad, they didn't take any chances. They used to crow all the time. I guess maybe they were international roosters, so they were crowing according to the midnight of Japan and then of Russia and then of different places in America. They were always crowing. But nevertheless, ideally, it's supposed to be, it's even a law in the Shulchan Aruch, that a person is supposed to have a rooster or something that'll wake him up at 12 o'clock at night so that he can say Tikkun Chatzot, that he can say the midnight prayer. Right? Anyway, I don't know how many people do the midnight prayer. Maybe that's because there's no roosters around. But nevertheless, a rooster, ideally, the ideal healthy, normal rooster crows at midnight. A rooster crows at midnight. That's what it says. How does the rooster know when it's midnight? How does he know when it's midnight? It says this is a very big miracle. Because what happens at midnight? At midnight, there's a spiritual thing that happens in the upper worlds, right? According to every place where you are. Every place the spiritual thing happens at a different midnight, because it's always midnight somewhere. So what happens in the midnight? The night gets darker and darker and darker. At midnight, that's when things start to get lighter. You don't see it. You don't feel it. You don't see the sun coming up. But nevertheless, that's the fact. It gets darker and darker and darker. That's the middle of the night. That's what's midnight. It's middle of the night. And then after midnight, so it starts approaching the day. It gets closer and closer to daytime. The rooster somehow or other senses this. The rooster has understanding to discern between day and night. Okay, what's this got to do with me? Why should I praise God? Because he made roosters have the ability to know when midnight is and that it's not going to get darker, it's getting lighter. Why? Because to arouse this love that we have and fear of God, that comes to a person, they're not from ourselves. It comes from above. By means of the rooster, the spiritual rooster, the source of the rooster that's above. That this is the ability to distinguish, to change from day into night. Hainu, bein chasadim, between what's called God's kindness and God's severity. The darkness is how things get more and more severe, less and less light. And midnight is when it starts to change and it starts going toward kindness, love. That's light. How do we discern the difference between them in the spiritual worlds? Bina ilah, what's called the upper level of awareness. The Kainal, there is a call, Shahar Brachas, all the other blessings. Okay, what's the Rebbe saying over here? Saying like this. It says in the Bible, we're made in the image of God, right? Now we know that God doesn't have an image. That's the opposite of Judaism. The opposite of Judaism is that God has no form. God is before the world. He's after the world. In reality, the Hasidic points out there really is no world. The world is a big miracle. God is creating it from nothing every instant. Therefore, God never changes. He has no being. But on the other hand, we see that God is creating the world. And so, he's creating the world according to a certain pattern. The world is creating this pattern of God. That's called the mystery of the 10 Sfirot. That's called the mystery of the 10 Sfirot. How is it God is really one and there's no division whatsoever in his being? And like we said before, God doesn't really exist. He creates all existence. But somehow or other, he creates all this existence according to a pattern. And even though it doesn't really exist because it's made from nothing, but nevertheless, God is creating it. That's what it says. The whole world is this incredible, amazing miracle, which we're only going to see. That's what Chassidut is trying to prepare us for, to see the amazing miraculousness of this world, how incredibly important the world is. That it's infinitely more real than we can possibly imagine because God's creating it. But he's creating it from nothing. So it doesn't really exist because it's made just of nothing. It says this pattern, according to which God creates the world, that's what's called his 10 utterances. In Kabbalah, it's called the 10 Sfirot. That's the whole pattern of creation. Man is also made according to these 10 Sfirot. But unlike the animals, we have the ability to influence God. That's the way God set it up. We don't really exist. God is creating us from nothing. We're really nothing. And nevertheless, we can convince God to change his mind, to make a good world. That's what the Rebbe is saying. That's the whole essence of the Holy Temple. What we do down here impresses, changes, so to speak, God's will to make a different world. But just the same way as we are different, right? All the aspects of our personality are different. So same thing, all the aspects of God's personality are also different. Okay, but between the essence of God and us, there's all these spiritual worlds. That's what's called the form of God. That's what's called these 10 Sfirot. So that's the spiritual source, the spiritual plan through which we are being created. And that's what we're thanking God for. We're thanking God for creating us according to the spiritual plan, for thanking God for having the spiritual plan at all. And that we're part of the creation. One of the things we thank God for is for having understanding. And that God made this aspect of understanding in the spiritual worlds also. And this is best demonstrated in the rooster, physical rooster down here. Somehow or other, the rooster knows what's happening in the upper worlds when it stops being more and more severe gevura, and when it starts being more and more chesed. He knows, he understands why, because that's the aspect of understanding, bina. And that's where we're thanking God. Also, all the other blessings, the call seder, a tefillah, and the whole entire order of our prayers in the morning, to contemplate in them. And if you think about it deeply, then you will find. So your whole existence, our existence, and the form we take in our existence, and our soul, and the form that our soul takes, that we have understanding, and we have love, and we have fear, and we have all these different aspects of our personality. This comes from the upper pattern of creation. And the more we think about this upper pattern, suddenly we start to realize that, hey, maybe I'm just a creation. And then we start to think, wow, these upper worlds are really amazing. This is just incredible. We're like nothing compared to the upper worlds. And then that's all these ideas of Kabbalah. And then you start to think, and these upper worlds, they also are nothing. And compared to the Creator, He's creating all these things. And who is the one that really influences the whole business? We do. As low as we are, that we're much below all the spiritual worlds, nevertheless, we are the ones that God has chosen to control this whole business. By our doing good, serving God, loving God, appreciating God, as God reacts and sends more. But where does this love and fear that we get come from? As of course, it began with God. This is a gift from God. And that's what we're thanking God from all the time. We're thanking Him for giving us understanding from these upper worlds and giving us love and etc. In order to draw down this love, that it should come to us from above, first of all, levatesha daguf. And now we come to this is going to be the left arm. First of all, we have to, subdue ourselves, control ourselves. Ulachnio, and to, humble. Ulashpil, and to, minimize, reduce our animal urges and traits. How do we do that? B'meriros, with bitterness. Kamosh Katuv, like it's written in a different place. Like it says, Korov Hashem the Nishborei Lev. God is close to those who have a broken heart. The Dake Ruach, and the people who have a humble spirit, Yoshia, God will save. Like it also says, these are sentences from Psalms. Ziv Elohim, what is the sacrifice to God? What is the sacrifice to God? In the temple, they used to bring sacrifices to God. That was the sacrifice? It says, no. You brought an animal to the holy temple because that's what God decided that you should do. What is really the sacrifice? Ruach Nishbara, a broken spirit. What's a broken spirit? A person is supposed to be happy. How can you be happy if you have a broken spirit? So the Rebbe says, of course you have to be happy, but what are you happy about? What makes you happy? Most people, what makes them happy is if they get attention, they get power, they get success, they get money, they get pleasure, right? If I get pleasure, if I get success, if I get attention, right? When I receive things, that makes me feel good, makes me happy. The more I get, the happier I am. Like we talked about before, they have these big, huge parties with like Rabbi Akiva and the other his compatriots. They were walking and they heard tremendous joy coming from the city of Rome, I think it was. Tremendous joy, people, music and laughter was breaking out, gales of laughter and music and clinking of glasses, and right. That's happiness. People are happy, but it's happy from the bad side. It's happy, selfish happiness. And that feeling of looking for selfish happiness, that's my whole being, that you have to break that spirit. Very difficult thing to do. Very difficult thing to do. To break the spirit that people want success, right? To break that spirit that's what I live for, that's a very difficult thing to do, to break. That's called selfishness, egotism. It becomes so natural that people don't feel that it's selfish. They think that's all there is to life. to break the spirit of selfishness. Very, very difficult thing to do. On the other hand, how do we do it? First of all, God helps us, but we have to make the vessel. What's the vessel? Bitterness. What does it mean, bitterness? Bitterness means suddenly you realize, how long am I going to continue this way? Let's just take a very exaggerated example, and that is a person who is addicted. A person who's an alcoholic. People who are alcoholics, usually it's impossible for them to stop. Genuine alcoholics. A genuine alcoholic, a person that's addicted to heroin or what these other drugs. If a person is genuinely addicted, there's gambling, people at the gambling, there's like 1,000 different things people get addicted to. People who are genuinely addicted, they can't stop. It's impossible for them to stop. The only thing that'll make them stop is, let's say they lose all their money, they get thrown into prison, something. But the people who are genuinely addicted, they lose their families, they get into debt, they get beaten up, they don't care. All they're thinking about is just want another drink. That's all they want. That's their whole life. They've reduced their whole life to just this one ridiculous, animalistic, stupid pleasure that they get. But they can't stop themselves, right? How can they stop themselves? They say, the guy gets thrown into prison, he gets this. As soon as he gets out, he just wants to take another drink. Or if he does take another drink, then he's finished. He has to. What's the way to get out of it? The way to get out of it, it has to begin with bitterness. What do I mean bitterness? Enough. A person says to himself, enough. I have to stop this. God, please save me. And then maybe he'll go to Alcoholics Anonymous. He'll do whatever he does, but that's the technique that he uses. But the basis of the whole thing has to be bitterness. As soon as the bitterness stops, then he'll go back to his old addictions. He has to say, I'm never going to do this again. This is not what I was created for, to run around after my own pleasures. I'm not going to do it. That's called a broken heart. Before he was happy. He was going down to the bars and all his friends and all this and this. And they would jumping like the city of Rome that Rabbi Akiva went to, passed by. Everyone's laughing and they're happy and they're joyous and they're freilich and dancing and this and that. And it's all just like in the toilet. But they love it. They enjoy it like a little child enjoys, playing with his feces. He enjoys it. It's warm and it smells and he's just always makes an impression. It's just he's getting something done in the world, right? Older people, when they grow up, so maybe they don't do such disgusting things. Maybe it's even more disgusting things. But how do you get out of it? He enjoys it. He feels his life is now worthwhile. He feels that nothing else is worthwhile. How do you get out of this? Bitterness. And now the Rebbe is not talking about, I gave you an exaggerated example of these addictions. Those are things which are obvious, right? You see the guys laying in the street, he's all drunk. But let's take things that we get addicted to, right? Selfishness, getting angry, being jealous, going after little pleasures, wanting attention, right? Getting all upset if we don't succeed, being broken by failure, laziness, all these traits, we get into it and we can't get out. How are you supposed to get out? Bitterness. And then there's something even more. Here the Rebbe says that you have to come to love God. You have to learn the Torah. You have to understand. Why don't we love God? Why? Because we're egotistical. We think about ourselves. I don't feel God. I don't know what you're talking about. But there's all these holy Jews that gave their lives for God, for the Torah. So what do I care? Says this indifference, that's called klipa. That has to be broken by bitterness. A person has to say, wow, I'm really off the track. How am I going to get off the back? I don't know what to do. Right? This is really terrible. All I want to do is look at my cellular phone all day, watch who knows what. I have to stop it. It gets bitter. This bitterness, like it says, God is close to those who have broken hearts. King David, he recognized the importance of this bitterness. Of course, when we talk about this bitterness, it speaks a lot about it in the Tanya. Chapter, what is it, 36, 37? It says this bitterness has to be only a couple of minutes every day, or maybe even a couple of minutes every week. It has to be true bitterness, but that can't be the rest of our day. It's supposed to be in order to bring us to serve God with happiness. In order that a person can draw down this level of love of God, that he should be shalanu, first of all, you have to make a sacrifice of yourself, of Elokim, of the severities. Shederech hahu, that by means of this is drawn down God. In other words, the less that you love your own self, ego, the more you can love God. The less you try to make yourself big, the more you can make God big. The source of all these bad emotions and depression and things like that comes from trying to make yourself great. And the source of happiness is trying to make God great. And he calls all this what's called breaking your ego, your false selfishness. That's called an arousal from below. Milamata, lamaila, that's from below to above. That's the whole idea of prayer. Of all in Torah, the whole thing of Torah is bechinat milamaila lamata, from above to below. And this whole thing of prayer, what we do, our bitterness, our love for God, our arousing ourselves to love God, to think about God, to contemplate God, to realize God, to love God, to fear God, that's all prayer from below to above. But there's also what's called Torah. Torah comes from above to below. Torah is God's gift from above to us. That's the level of all of your soul. What do we say? We have to love God. After we say Shema Yisrael, what do we say? Shema, understand, Jews, God is our God. He's our God. He's our power. God reacts to what we do. God is one of us. When we think about this, then what do we come to? You love God with all of your heart. That's prayer. Then after that, you love God with all of your soul. That's learning Torah. It's drawn down into all of the powers of your soul, into thought, into speech, into action. That's called an arousal from above. You say the words of Torah, you understand the words of Torah, your lips move when you say the words of Torah. That's thought, speech, and action of God. It's a gift from God. We're saying God's words, we're thinking God's thoughts. That is a gift from above, right? God tells us what to think. He tells us what to say. That's the Torah. When we do that, then this is arouses by God, chachmato, God's wisdom, v'ratzono, and His will. And God's wisdom and will, we say by God, that God is wise, but not with a known wisdom. So who would dream that by means of prayer we affect God? Who would dream by means of learning Torah that we affect God? Who would believe a thing like that? But that's how we started the class. The whole entire world, including the angels, are all depending on the service of the Jewish people. Even one Jewish person. And who is that one Jewish person? Every single one. The more the better, but even one is sufficient. That when we learn Torah, that arouses God's wisdom, and God is with no known wisdom. That the Torah is the wisdom and the will of God, of the Creator. Is just put into physical things, and that's the idea of Korah b'Torah. That's what it says when you read the Torah. It doesn't say read the Torah. It says Korah. You call in the Torah. Korah b'Torah. Also, when the person who reads on Shabbat, he's called the Baal Korah. He calls in the. What do you mean he calls in the Torah? He's calling to God. The words of Torah call to God. These are God's words. When we say them, this arouses God. Like it's written in another place. So that's what it means, Bakal. You should love God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and all of your might. That's what it says in the Torah, right after that sentence of Shema Yisrael. And you should love God. And we say this sentence every day, twice a day at least. And you should love God with all of your heart. That's prayer. With all of your soul, that's learning Torah. B'chol meodecha, and all of your might, this is tshuva. This is what we call returning to God. What does this mean? Ki gadol tshuva shemakarevet et hagula. The tshuva, returning to God, this is what really will bring the future redemption. That's what it means. B'chol meodecha. Meod, this means a lot more than what you want. What does that mean? What does it say? You have to love God with all of your heart, with all of your soul and with all of your might. The word for might is just, I'm just translating it that way. It means me'odecha, it means with all of your, a lot, big numbers. What does that mean? What it means, because when you love God with all of your heart and with all of your soul, then this arouses God, we said, with a revelation of God that is in the physical world. There's just a little bit of a ray. That's what we said before. Like we says, it's like a little flash of godliness. Like, for instance, one little thought we have about God. Like it says, Mashal Kashem, like one little thought is not considered to be anything regarding the person. That's also what happens when we do a commandment or learn the Torah. A little bit of spark of godliness comes down. Why? Because we serve God in a normal Jewish way, which is very unusual. But if we do more than what we're supposed to, if we do anything more, this is what we're going to have to learn tomorrow, because there's a lot more. If you do more than what we're supposed to call me'odecha, that you don't satisfy yourself with serving God. Oh, yesterday I was doing who knows such a bad things, and now I'm doing something good. That's enough. No. A Jew, again, I repeat this again because I think it's very beautiful. The Rebbe was interviewed by BBC, and they asked him, "Are you happy?" By us, America, and I don't know wherever in the American world, maybe it's also the same thing in Europe. In America, I was brought up with what's the main principle? Are you happy? If it makes you happy, right? That's the American parents, maybe just the American Jewish parents, could be. That's the big question. Does it make you happy? If it makes him happy, then he's good. That's okay. Because I'm happy, that's what he is, makes him happy. Right? And he said, listen, if you do this, you're not going to be happy in the end. Don't be a thief, don't be a criminal. You won't be happy. It makes me happy. You're making other people unhappy. Oh, I didn't think about that. Happy, you got to be happy. But that's the whole essence of life in the secular world. You got to be happy. So they asked the Rebbe, are you happy? And the Rebbe said, yes, I am happy, but I'm not satisfied. He said, yes, I'm happy, but I'm not satisfied. I'm happy, I'm doing what God wants. I'm doing what a Jew is supposed to do. I'm doing Torah, I'm doing commandments. I'm making the most of every moment of my life. And that makes me happy, right? I'm doing something meaningful, but I'm not satisfied. The world is not the way it's supposed to be. You always have to do more. I bet you're happy. You're doing what you're supposed to do. It makes you happy. He says, yeah, but I could be doing much, much more. I could be, and that's what's called Bechol Me'odecha, and that's what we're going to learn, God willing, tomorrow. Now let's learn the Devar Malchut.